Good afternoon from a very cold Gettysburg. It's low to mid-30s today. No snow yet this year, but it was definitely wrap up warm weather this morning. Defrost the car on the way out here from Maryland, and the drive up. Stopped several times to pick up coffee, and I do have a thermos of coffee with me, so if I disappear off screen and back on again, that's just because I'm trying to grab a cup of coffee and keep myself a little bit warm here this morning. So certainly glad of no shave November, because I do appreciate the sparse grey facial hair that I have at the moment. I'm out here on the Gettysburg battlefield today, and we're going to be talking about Louisianans. We're going to be talking about the participation of men from Louisiana who'd made it all the way up to the Army of Northern Virginia. Now that's some task if you think about how far away Louisiana is from Virginia, and then had joined the Army of Northern Virginia and then participated within campaigns. And we're talking about the 1863 Gettysburg campaign and the participation of Louisiana regiments, infantry regiments and Louisiana batteries, artillery batteries, during the Battle of Gettysburg. I'm on West Confederate Avenue at the moment. Behind me here is the state monument, state memorial for the state of Louisiana. And if I just do a quick traverse, you see the round tops behind me, Cemetery Ridge going along there, so the Union positions right across the other side of the field there. It's an interesting spot for the Louisiana monument to be. When we think about the participation of Louisiana units at Gettysburg, we're usually thinking of Hayes Brigade, that Louisiana Tigers Brigade, and Nichols Brigade, so those two infantry brigades, and we're thinking about their fighting over on the north side of town, through the town itself, some street fighting, the battles for East Cemetery Hill and for Culp's Hill. So we're talking about infantry units, infantry brigades in an infantry fight, the Louisiana Tigers. That's typically who we're thinking of. But of course there were other Louisiana units serving with the Army of Northern Virginia, and those were artillery batteries. So there are several artillery batteries in the A&V, and a grouping of those, 4 companies of those, are here in this exact position, running a line along here. It's Eshelman's battalion, and it is the Washington, Louisiana Artillery Battalion, 4 companies of them. Still exists as a unit today, actually, carrying on its lineage from the time of pre-Civil War, so antebellum militia units. This is a regiment that traces its lineage back to certainly the War of 1812 and Andy Jackson, the Battle of New Orleans and all that stuff, through the Civil War. But then after the Civil War continues its lineage through the National Guard, and today I think is the, I want to say 141st Field Artillery, Louisiana National Guard. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong on the exact number of that, but it could be 144th. Not sure. Not from Louisiana, not National Guard soldier in Louisiana. But anyway, I'm just saying the Washington batteries of Louisiana Artillery still continue their lineage today in Louisiana National Guard. So it's a long storied historic unit that can trace its origins back to before the Civil War, but also here at the Battle of Gettysburg, particularly in this position on July 3rd, third day of battle, 1863. The Washington Artillery was engaged here, and as part of the when Longstreet's assault goes in against Cemetery Ridge across there that we know today as Pickett's Charge, and the Confederate guns of course had to support those infantry assaults, and in support of those infantry assaults were the guns that were behind me here. The battalion here I believe had in service 8 Napoleons, so 8 Model 1857 12-pounder smoothbore Napoleon cannon, and also 2 12-pounder howitzers, so can lob those shells at a steeper trajectory. So 10 guns in total here, and I believe the battalion had captured a Union 3-inch ordnance rifle earlier, and I don't know whether they actually brought that into service because they wouldn't have had the ammunition for it, but they'd certainly captured a gun or found an abandoned Union gun somewhere along their travels and had picked that up. So this is where the state of Louisiana chose to put its memorial, here on West Confederate Avenue, in one of the artillery positions. If it had picked the locations for the infantry fighting, that would have been in the town, where the town of Gettysburg now is, where the schools are, middle school, high school, the bottom of East Cemetery Hill, and a cluster of buildings there. And there's a lot of Union memorials there. There are some markers for Confederate units, but they're markers, not monuments. So the clustering of monuments occurs along West Confederate Avenue, particularly here. So, we've got the Mississippi and the Tennessee and the Virginia and Florida and Louisiana and soldiers and sailors and so forth, and Texas and so forth, all along this line here. This is the side of the battlefield for the Confederate monuments, and to have placed a large Confederate monument on the other side of the battlefield would perhaps not have been appropriate. So that's why the state of Louisiana chose to place its memorial here, dedicated here in 1971. So 110 year centenary, I guess, of 1861, and so that's when the statue was put here, sculptured by Donald DeLue. He's also responsible for the Mississippi Memorial and the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial here as well. So a sculptor that's got several works on this battlefield. Now, Louisianans in the Army of Northern Virginia. We look at the Army of Northern Virginia. Of course, it's got Virginians in it, and it's got North Carolinians and South Carolinians, Alabamans, etc., Georgians. But it's got some men from far-flung places. So, yes, it does have men from Texas. That's a long way to come. It does have men from Louisiana. That's a long way to come as well. So, the Army of Northern Virginia, there were slightly more than 3,000 men from Louisiana serving with the Army of Northern Virginia here at Gettysburg in July of 1863. And of those 3,000, 725 are recorded as casualties, so that's killed, wounded, captured, missing in action. That's about 25%, so around about a quarter of the men that were present for duty here as Louisianians, with those Louisianan infantry battalions, infantry regiments and artillery batteries. About a quarter of them became casualties during the battle. So it's the seventh largest contingent of state troops in the Army of Northern Virginia, and here at Gettysburg, coincidentally, it is the seventh largest number of Confederate casualties accrued by a state during the battle. So it's proportionate to its participation in the battle. Its casualties are proportionate to its participation in the battle. It's a hard-fought battle, so casualties are very, very high. So the Louisianan troops that were here had a reputation. We're in the third year of the war. They've earned a reputation. They've earned a reputation as hard-fighting men. At the beginning of the war, some of them had flamboyant zouave costumes, uniforms, and were ferocious-looking men. But they've earned this reputation as hard-fighting men. They've also earned other reputations. They've earned reputations as hard-drinking men and hard-fighting men off-duty. The Northern press, in particular, taken with them. In the 1st Louisiana Regiment that was raised, the 1st Louisiana Volunteer Infantry, one of the companies, so a company of 100 men in the 1st Regiment raised, one of the companies was known as the Tigers. Then the entire regiment became known as the Tigers, then the entire brigade became known as the Tigers, Wheaton's Tigers. That will then pass on to command of Harry Hayes, and so it'll be Hayes' Tigers here at Gettysburg. But that becomes known as the Tigers Brigade, and then eventually the Northern press, just start describing all Louisianan troops as Tigers, Louisiana Tigers. But they've earned a reputation in the Northern press. They're like the boogeymen of the South. They're the ones that the Northern press like to sink their teeth into. So it's these wild men from Louisiana, from these swamps and bayous and these strange cities like New Orleans, these giant multi-ethnic, multicultural cities, are portrayed as thieves, drunkards, foreigners, barbarians, etc. They've earned this reputation in the northern press, and that's often how they're dismissed by the northern press, as sort of like a bunch of thieves and drunks and looters and rapists. But they had earned a reputation as hard-fighting troops. Very much by this point of the war, very much by 1863, you consider Hayes's brigade, that Louisiana Tigers brigade that had originally been Wheaton's brigade, you'd certainly regard them, and probably Nichols Brigade as well, as some of the shock troops of the Confederacy. For the Army of Northern Virginia, if you're looking for a brigade of troops to throw in and get up close and not be afraid to close and do the dirty work, not from a distance with musketry, but to get in and close with bayonet and rifle butt and fist, and if necessary pick up rocks and throw rocks, and get in hand-to-hand fighting. If you're looking for a brigade of infantry to do that, you look towards the Louisianans and you ask them to perform that duty, because you know that they will do it. So they've earned this reputation as hard fighters, and they bring that reputation with them here to Gettysburg in July of 1863. So we just want to go through some of the units that were here, try and think of how some of those units arrived on the battlefield, the order in which they arrived on the battlefield. So on that first day of battle, when you get that cavalry meeting engagement between Buford's cavalry and Harry Heth's infantry coming in as part of Army of Northern Virginia 3rd Corps, so that 1st Confederate Infantry Division that's here on the field. Within that infantry division, there is a Louisiana artillery battery. It's the Donaldsville Louisiana Artillery Battery. It's a small unit. It has one 10-pounder Parrott and 2 3-inch ordnance rifles. So, a full Union battery would have 6 guns. A Confederate battery of this period would be lucky to have 4 guns. So less than 4 guns, you're starting to get, you're noticing that the batteries are beginning to lose guns and not be able to replace them by this stage of the war. So it has 3 guns. They're all rifled artillery pieces, 10-pounder Parrott and 2 3-inch ordnance rifles. And that's with Heth's division. They came into action on the first day of battle around about 15:30. As they start coming in, and that artillery comes in, it replaces artillery that's already been in battle. It comes up from the reserve, and about 3:30 in the afternoon goes into action along Herr's Ridge, McPherson's Ridge, back in that position. So putting that pressure on Union 1st Corps, and as part of that Confederate artillery effort supporting the Confederate troops that are pushing the Union troops of Union 1st Corps back into Gettysburg town and back up onto Cemetery Hill. So as 1st Corps breaks, those Louisiana artillery are pouring shot onto them. July the 2nd, the next day, that battery is moved forward, and it supports the assaults, the Confederate infantry assaults that go in against East Cemetery Hill. So it's 3rd Corps supporting some of those attacks, and some of those attacks are being made by 2nd Corps men. And the 2nd Corps men that are making those attacks, of course, are amongst them Hayes and Hayes, particularly Hayes Louisiana Tigers Brigade. So you've got they might not know that their fellow Louisianans are putting in that attack, but they're supporting that attack with artillery fire from the flank there. And then on July the 3rd, that battery is in reserve and is not actually used. It's probably expended its ammunition. It's probably men are getting exhausted, and it's not used during the assault, that Longstreet's picket charge assault. It's one of the batteries that is in reserve. So you have other artillery batteries that are in position. As I said, I'm here on Confederate Avenue, West Confederate Avenue, the location of the state memorial here for Louisiana. In the 1st Corps Artillery, 1st Corps Artillery is actually 1st Corps Artillery Reserve is commanded by Colonel James Walton. He is a Louisianan. He was previously pre-war commander of the Washington Artillery, and he was the senior artillery officer in 1st Corps. So in theory, he should be in command during Pickett's charge. He should be in command of that artillery barrage, but instead Longstreet's picked out Alexander, who is a subordinate of Watson, and asked him to arrange the supporting fires for the infantry assault. And then, of course, Watson is mortally offended by that and very upset, and remains upset about that after this battle as well. But anyway, so the artillery in First Corps, which are lining along excuse me, just a regular cough, not the corona, I promise, include 4 companies of the Washington, Louisiana Infantry. So as I said, they've got 8 Napoleons, 2 howitzers, and there's also the Madison, Louisiana Light Artillery, which is also part of First Corps Artillery Reserve that participate here. So they're putting in fires on the second day and on the third day of battle in support of, if I flick around here, directly behind me is the peach orchard. So the fighting in the peach orchard would have been supported by artillery from here. The fighting towards the round tops could be supported from here. The fighting and any skirmishing here back towards the wheat field could have been supported from here as well. So the artillery line, when you walk along West Confederate Avenue, it is lined with artillery positions. They were not all lined here just for Pickett's charge. They were lined here from the end of the first day and throughout the second day and into the third day to support all the Confederate action that takes place all along this front here. So those Louisiana artillery pieces participated in the actions on July 2nd and July 3rd. So that's the artillery who played that role. And I want to look at the infantry regiments that were here. The Louisiana Infantry Regiments are here, and they're brigaded into 2 brigades. They're brigaded into Hayes Brigade, the original Tigers Brigade, and they're also grouped into Nichols Brigade. So if we look at Hayes Brigade first, Hayes Brigade, Louisiana Tigers Brigade, comprises the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th Louisiana Infantry Regiments under command of Brigadier General Harry Hayes. They arrive on the battlefield as part of Jubal Early's division in 2nd Corps on July the 1st, participate in some fighting on July the 1st. But they're most notable for their actions on July the 2nd, the second day of battle. So they are holding on July the 2nd, they are holding positions in the town of Gettysburg itself. They've occupied some buildings. They are have been skirmishing in the streets with Union skirmishers, and they are jockeying around for position on what's now Steinwehr Avenue and at the round of the base of what's now East Cemetery Hill. Now East Cemetery Hill is an important position when the Union line is talked about as being that fish hook. The hook begins at East Cemetery Hill. So if you knock out the apex of that hook, you've split the line there on that hook and divided a small section to the north of the town away from the main Union army. So it's a high point that's covered by Union artillery, also a vital point on the battlefield. The original orders for Early and Dick Ewell from 2nd Corps on July the 1st, on the first day of battle, was to take East Cemetery Hill that evening if practical. They judged that it was impractical to take it. The light was fading, the men were exhausted. They may have been fighting all day, confused from fighting through the town, so they'd have to reorganise disorganised units into an attack formation, attack uphill in the dark against entrenched artillery in artillery lunettes. After an exhausting day of fighting, not a prospect that they looked forward to. They deemed it not practical, and so did not put in the attack that evening. So they have to put in the attack on July the 2nd. And Hayes Brigade puts in that attack on East Cemetery Ridge on the 2nd. Not the only unit, of course, but like we're only talking about Louisianans today. So Harry Hayes orders men forward. They break through what is described as 3 Union lines. That doesn't really mean that they broke through 3 solid lines. What that means is that they brushed aside skirmish lines and moved up the hill and brushed aside more men in skirmish formation, and they were aiming for those Union guns. If they could get up there, capture those Union guns, and knock them off the hill, then reserves could come up and exploit that gap. So Hayes goes up. They're fighting all the way up. It's a bitter fight. They are in hand-to-hand fighting some of the way. So that's bayonets and rifle butts. They are drawing off. They capture a couple of. No, I think they take away 4 Union battle flags during that fight. But as Hayes advances, he looks around for this support, thinking like, okay, we're about to push to the top of the hill. Now, where's the support? Where's the backup that I need? I can get to the top of this hill, but when I get to the top of the hill, we're going to be exhausted. I've got men dead on the field below me. I've got wounded to deal with. I've got men that are running out of ammunition and are tired. And we've fought all our way up here, and now I need fresh troops to come up, relieve us, and push through. He turns to look for them, and there's no one in support. So in absolute disgust, with no support, he has to order his men to withdraw. So having almost done it, there's no support for them, and they are forced to withdraw. That Hayes, his Louisiana Tigers Brigade, is forced to withdraw. In that brigade is the 8th Louisiana. So there's a great book that I'll talk about later on. I'll recommend that towards the end. But we can look at like some of the letters home that some of these men had written. So primary source material for men that have participated in the battle. And of the 8th Louisiana, one of the men that participated in the battle was Lieutenant Warren Jackson of the 8th Louisiana. He's writing home to his brother, who was also an officer in the 8th Louisiana, but had been wounded. I want to say back, Bristow, no, somewhere out down the valley earlier in the campaign, had been wounded and was convalescing, and so wanted news of the battle from his brother. And so his brother wrote to brother. Lieutenant Warren wrote to Lieutenant Warren about the experiences of the battle here at Gettysburg and the Gettysburg campaign in particular. So in his correspondence to his brother, he recalls how on June the 22nd they crossed the Potomac from Virginia into Maryland, and there's only that short part, that's that short little stick of Maryland. Maryland then branches off here into Garrett and Allegheny County and Washington County, and then the main part of Maryland here. So there's that little thin strip. If you've ever driven up Interstate 81, you may know that. But they cross over Maryland in a day and march into, says they shake the dust of Maryland off their boots on June the 23rd and march into Pennsylvania with the band playing Dixie. So in good spirits, they march then back and forth across Pennsylvania. This is as much a military campaign as a raiding campaign for supplies. So they're gathering up whatever they can, corn, hams, buttermilk, horses, whatever they can get to supply the Army of Northern Virginia. They are taking and then leaving worthless Confederate currency and promissory notes for. So not really stealing. They're leaving worthless currency in exchange for the goods that they take. But he recalls they march back and forth. There's a lot of counter-marching and marching as they march from town to town and village to village, township to township throughout this area, with in 2nd Corps, Richard Ewell's Corps, and brings them then to the battle itself on July the 1st, but then in particular talks about, in his correspondence to his brother, the fighting on July 2nd on the battle for East Cemetery Hill. So on July the 1st, I'm going to read direct from his quotes. So July the 1st, as they arrived on the battlefield, he wrote of driving in the Union 11th Corps, so Howard's Corps, that's deployed north of the town. So that's, Carl Schurz, Francis Barlow, Schimmelfennig, and the 11th Corps that's deployed, and they're driven in by Ewell's Corps. And Lieutenant Jackson writes, "We shot them down, bayoneted them, and captured many more prisoners than we had men in the brigade." So, good day of fighting for them. But then, on July the 2nd, they have this heavy fighting for East Cemetery Hill. And he writes, "Old Harry," so that's Harry Hayes, Brigadier General Harry Hayes, "shouted forward, and we went over fences, ditches, and 2 marshy fields," if you've walked that land you'll know those marshy fields, "and fetched up at a stone fence where Mr. Yank had posted himself and did not want to leave. But with bayonets and clubbed guns we drove them back." So it's not open ground. You've got to climb over fences, you've got to climb over hedgerows, you've got to cross ditches, you've got to cross boggy land, and you're coming up East Cemetery Hill in the face of Union artillery fire, now opening on you with canister, and you're also Union musketry. the Union infantry protecting those cannons are also firing on you. But those Louisianans get up there and they're going in with the rifle bayonet and they're going in with the rifle butt in a hand-to-hand fight. But they eventually, without that support, when Hayes does turn around and look for the support to come up behind him, there's no support. And essentially that's a futile attack. They've made this attack and have to turn around and go back again. So you can imagine the anger and the disappointment that those men feel having conducted this attack. And this attack proved to be of no overall use other than just leaving more dead Louisianans on the field. So we want to look at Nichols Brigade, so the 2nd Brigade of Louisiana Infantry that's here in the Army of Northern Virginia. It's commanded by Francis T. Nichols, notionally. He is the commander of the brigade, but he's not in command on the day of Gettysburg. Actually, interesting man. He'll go on to become governor of Louisiana after Reconstruction, so post that horrible compromise there of 1877 and the end of Reconstruction. Nichols will go on to become governor of Louisiana, but on the day of the battle he is not in command of his brigade. His brigade is commanded by Jesse Williams, and the brigade comprises of the 1st, 2nd, 10th, 14th and 15th Louisiana Infantry Regiments. So I'll talk a little bit about them. So just to do the 10th, we'll talk about the 10th Louisiana Artillery. So the 10th Louisiana Artillery, raised in New Orleans. Interesting regiment. It's often known as the Foreign Legion. It's sometimes known as the French Legion. It contains men from multiple nationalities. So it contains Spaniards, Frenchmen, Italians, Irishmen, Germans, all sorts. I recall somebody saying it had 21 different nationalities represented within the regiment. That may be a slight exaggeration. There is a large contingent of Irishmen in the 10th Louisiana. So about a third of the regiment have Irish heritage. And of the entire regiment, when you think of a regiment, when the regiment is recruited, you recruit 10 companies of 100 men each. So in theory, you should be recruiting 1,000 men to a regiment, but you're recruiting 10 companies to a regiment. Only 3 of the companies in the 10th Louisiana can really claim that they are predominantly manned by native southern troops, like people that were resident of Louisiana for a long term before the war. The rest are people recruited from merchant ships and itinerant classes, and it's got this sort of like fantastic multi-language, multi-ethnic, multicultural background of troops in the 10th Louisiana. I believe the 10th Louisiana battle flag is on display. I might be able to find a photograph of that and post that as a photograph later. But you can just imagine the sort of like when you think about the French Foreign Legion, all those different nationalities that come together in the French Foreign Legion, they all have to learn French, and that's the language of communication in the French Foreign Legion, and they take on the culture, not necessarily of Frenchmen, but they take on the culture of the Legion itself. That becomes their home. So for these men, these different men from different nationalities that joined the 10th Louisiana, perhaps they regarded the 10th Louisiana as their home rather than Louisiana itself as their home. They regarded that sort of like their comrades in arms, speaking Italian, Hungarian, Gaelic, whatever languages they spoke, in this multi-ethnic, interesting unit of the 10th Louisiana. That's one that's of, I think, some interest to me and worth looking at. So Nichols Brigade, part of Johnson's division in Richard Ewell's 2nd Corps. So, Allegheny Johnson, one of the division commanders, and Nichols Brigade is in that. Nichols Brigade is one of the brigades in Johnson's division. Now on the 2nd of July, 2nd day of battle, they're not putting in an attack on East Cemetery Hill, they're putting in an attack slightly across at Culp's Hill, and they are heavily engaged in fighting at Culp's Hill. So we've done a couple of tours from Culp's Hill, done some battlefield tours from Culp's Hill. Maybe when we get over there again, we'll traipse up. We'll traipse up through the woodland, and we'll look at some of the fighting positions and the Union forces that were engaged against those Louisianans struggling up through Culp's Hill. So Culp's Hill today is choked with trees. It's more wooded now than it was in 1863. If you look at these trees behind me, it's a decent growth of timber, but the undergrowth is very much scraggly. You can't really walk through these trees because there's just so much undergrowth and so much short growth there. At the time of 1863, a lot of these places were woodlots, so there was a lot of gaps between these trees, and the trees were kept cleared, the woodlots were kept open. It's also easier to hunt. If you're Pennsylvania right now, we're actually in white-tailed deer season. So you've got good white-tailed deer hunting in Pennsylvania as well. So if you want to hunt through treeland, you don't want a lot of scrub. You want to maintain some open spaces between those trees so that you can see the deer and get a good shot on those deer, get a good bead on those deer. So the woodlands were preserved and actually worked around here much more than they are now. As part of battlefield preservation today, we tend to leave things alone and just kind of let things be. Particularly with woodland, we don't really manage the woodland. When you look out over the battlefield itself, yes, we do cut the grass and we do plant corn and we do cut corn. If you go over to the peach orchard, there actually are peach trees in the peach orchard, and you can see that we maintain the barns and the farms. Let's just come and look over the Spangler building here. There you go. So we maintain barns and farms and all sorts of things like that, but we preserve the open land and we preserve the monuments and we preserve the buildings, but we just kind of tend to leave the woodland alone, and so it gets overgrown and you can't really cut your way through it. On Culp's Hill there are a few walking paths, so perhaps we can get over onto Culp's Hill another day, talk about Nichols Brigade, particularly over there on Culp's Hill on that 2nd, and the bit of fighting that took place with Johnson's division against Union troops over there on July the 2nd. So on July the 2nd, the focus of a lot of people's attention, particularly if you're a fan of the movie or the book The Killer Angels, or you are you remember the Ken Burns documentary. A lot of the focus on the second day of battle is given over to Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, the 20th Maine, up there on Little Round Top, their defensive Little Round Top, that left of the Union line. You are the end of the Union line on the left flank there. So he's holding that end of the line against an assault, because if they break him and they roll up the Union line, then they can get behind. The same kind of thing happens over on Culp's Hill, the far right of the Union line, and there's similar bitter fighting there where the Confederates are trying to turn the Union line over there on the right. So that's part of the action that Nichols Brigade is involved in on July the 2nd. So that's another Louisiana Infantry Brigade over there on that day. So where are we up to now? My goodness, it's getting a bit chilly still, so I'm going to have to break soon and get myself some more coffee. But so that's in Richard Ewell's corps, Johnson's division. Also in that corps is another, the last, I believe, Louisiana Artillery battery that I haven't mentioned yet is the Louisiana Guard Artillery under Captain Charles Greene. They're engaged on all 3 days of battle, so they come into action in relief of Rhodes' division. They replace some of his artillerymen on the first day to continue the artillery assault from Ewell's division, Ewell's corps as it arrives on the field. So they're engaged on July the 1st. They're engaged again on July the 2nd in support of that fighting for East Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. They have, as I said, a Union artillery battery is about 6 guns at this period of the point of the war. Confederate battery is usually around 4 guns, and they do have 4 guns. They have 2 10-pounder Parrott rifled guns and 2 3-inch ordnance rifles. So they have 4 guns in their battery, and they participate there. They also have some fighting on July the 3rd. Now on July the 3rd, you think, okay, well, they've been fighting north of the town. They're either going to be still shelling East Cemetery Hill, or they're going to be shelling Culp's Hill, or perhaps they were moved slightly to support our infantry assault. The answer is no. This is an interesting unit. They get pulled out to lend additional artillery support to Stuart's cavalry. So out there on what we now call East Cavalry Field, where Stuart is trying to make a flanking movement around the right flank of the Union Army, the Confederate left, Stuart is weak in artillery, is very weak in horse artillery, and so they move up some artillery in support of him, and that Louisiana Guard battery is moved up in support of, it's one of the units of Ewell's Corps that's moved up in support of Stuart's cavalry. So those Louisiana gunners lend some support to Jeb Stuart's cavalry action over there on East Cavalry Field on July the 3rd. So that really is the contingent of Louisiana troops here, and as you can see, they are on all parts of the battlefield. They are over here in Longstreet's position towards the Confederate right. They are in the centre of the Union position with Harry Heth in 3rd Corps. They are over there on the Confederate left in Richard Ewell's Corps with artillery, small artillery contingent, but also a large infantry contingent, 2 infantry brigades putting in an attack over there. So they are Louisiana troops on all parts of the battlefield here at Gettysburg. And so you can pick out that from that macro scale, you can see that they're in all parts of the battlefield and be out here at the Louisiana State Memorial. But if you come out here and you drive the tour and you stop here at the Louisiana, this Triumph, Spirit of Triumph, or Triumph of the Spirit, I think. What is this called? Spirit of the Triumph or Triumph of the Spirit? One of those. But anyway, I just wanted to say, so we're looking at the Confederate troops on an overall basis, how the Louisiana troops are spread out over the entire battlefield and participate. People from Louisiana are participating in all sectors of the battle here at Gettysburg. So, but if you want to drill down to the individual units and get down to Hayes Brigade, there's markers for Hayes Brigade we can get down to, and Nichols Brigade, and you can actually get out onto those individual parts of the battlefield and find where the individual groups of Louisianans were actually engaged. It would be impossible for me to grab my camera and run around like it's the Blair Witch Project and cover this entire battlefield in a live stream or as a video without having to cut and change and drive to different parts of the battlefield. So you wouldn't be able to do that all in one go. But if you come and you take a driving tour of Gettysburg and you drive the route, you'll certainly pass by all of the places that Louisiana troops saw action in during the Battle of Gettysburg. So if you want more information really on that, there's a really good book that I recommend, and it is by Scott Mingus. It is called The Louisiana Tigers in the Gettysburg Campaign, published by LSU Press. So The Louisiana Tigers in the Gettysburg Campaign. Nice, simple title. It says exactly on the title what's in the book. It's about all the Louisiana troops and their participation in the Gettysburg campaign. So from the moment the campaign kicks off and moves up the Shenandoah Valley into Maryland and into Pennsylvania to the battle itself, and then also the withdrawal. And there's a lot of first-hand accounts from letters written by men that participated in the campaign. So it's a really good, solid book published by LSU Press and by Scott Mingus. So I would definitely recommend that as a book. You can find it on Amazon, you can find it at the LSU Press website. I would definitely recommend that book. So if you're coming out to Gettysburg, if you're from Louisiana and you're visiting Gettysburg and you are looking for where are the locations of these Louisiana units, so take yourself to the Visitor Center. You can't miss it, it's signposted, and you just put it into your GPS as well. The Visitor Center for the National Battlefield. Get in there, get a map, ask them to mark on the map where some of the Louisiana memorials are. You could be able to find them yourself. If you want a more detailed tour, hire yourself a licensed battlefield guide. One of the guys in blue coats, the men and the women that are licensed battlefield guides here at Gettysburg do an excellent job. They can give you a general tour of the battlefield, but specifically if you say, hey, I'm from Louisiana, or hey, I have an interest in Louisiana and I'd like to see where Hayes Brigade was, I'd like to see where Nichols Brigade was, I'd like to see where the Louisiana artillery batteries were, Those battlefield guides will be able to take you out specifically to those locations and give you a very tailored custom tour and fill you in all the information at those sites as well. So highly recommended if you want a specialist tour at Gettysburg. Get down to the visitor centre, hire yourself a licensed battlefield guide and get out here on the battlefield. We often say that the best way to experience these battles and the best way to understand these battles is to actually be on the battlefield itself. Park Service historian Ed Bears said that if you want to understand the Battle of Gettysburg, you have to walk the ground. You have to walk the ground where Pickett's men charged, because then you'll see that it's not just flat land. You'll see that the land undulates, that there are swales and there are points at which the men are visible and not visible. So you get a better appreciation by walking the ground. So certainly if you come out and you want to walk the ground that Hayes's men took up East Cemetery Hill, you'll appreciate that climb into the face of guns, and you'll also appreciate the climb of Nichols' men up Culp's Hill through the woodland into the face of Union entrenchments that they dug on the top of Culp's Hill. So walking the ground will give you you can look at it on a map, but a map is flat, and you don't get an appreciation for the steepness of the climb. You don't necessarily get an appreciation for how well concealed your enemy might be and the devastating fire they can pour on you. When you come up East Cemetery Hill, if you walk up East Cemetery Hill from the bottom of the hill, and you can see those Union artillery positions still marked out today with memorial cannon in their lunettes, so those little dug-in emplacements, little U-shaped dugouts that you roll a cannon into to provide it with some protection against rifle fire and shrapnel fire from the front, those lunettes. You can see that's quite a formidable place to assault, so if you come out and you walk that ground, you get a better appreciation for it. So I definitely recommend, if you can get out to Gettysburg, come out to Gettysburg. If you can take the tour, you can do a 2-hour driving tour yourself. You can extend that tour to 3 hours if you want to get out to Wright Avenue and East Cavalry Field and take in the full scope of the battlefield. Or if you really want something specific, then, as I said, go to the visitor centre, get yourself a licensed battlefield guide and come out here and look for those Louisiana sites, or if you're from Virginia or Pennsylvania, wherever you're from, they'll tailor those tours for you. So, sorry for the network connectivity problems earlier on today. We sometimes have this out here on the battlefield, particularly on the open ground. If you recall, I had it before during a Pickett's charge where we were trying to walk Pickett's charge as a live stream, but the network kept dropping out because it's like, hey, you're in the middle of a cornfield and there's no signal here. So, same happened earlier today, which is why we're doing a static video. I'm recording this video, just generally talking about Louisiana troops. And we're going to upload this to the Facebook page and also to YouTube as soon as we can pick up some network connectivity. So, thanks for watching the video today. Thanks for bearing with me. It's cold, it's chilly. I'm going to go back and get some coffee out of my thermos flask. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for all the comments that I get here on Facebook and on YouTube. I do appreciate those. I read them all. I try and respond to as many of the ones that, if you ask a direct question, I will try and respond to that. I love positive comments. I'll take the negative comments as well, and I'll try and respond to any criticism that I get and any suggestions that you get. As I said, I've had some comments about the sound, so I got myself a new microphone. So I do follow up on when people have said, like, I can't really hear you, David. Then, you know, we're trying to work on some of that technology stuff as well. So thanks for the support you give me. As I say, I come out and do all these things for free. I don't charge for these battlefield tours. These ones that I do on predominantly Tuesday lunchtimes, I come out to some of the battlefields and do a 30-45 minute battlefield tour on Tuesday lunchtimes, live stream on Facebook. If you would like to support what I'm doing, particularly if you'd like to buy me a cup of coffee on a cold day like this, click on the link to buy me a cup of coffee in the link that I'll post under the video, and you can buy me a $3 cup of coffee just to say thanks for being out there on a cold day. And yeah, I genuinely will spend that $3 on a cup of coffee, because that's pretty much what fuels me out here on the battlefield today. So actually, there are a couple of snow flurries dropping down now in front of me, so that shows you how chilly it is out here today. And I'm going to wrap everything up, finish the coffee in my thermos, and tuck myself back in the car and run the heater on high, And I hope you have a good week. Thanks for watching the video. Hope to be out soon. I think we're going to be, next video will be a live stream tour on December I can't remember. But the next live stream tour is on the Facebook page. This is an event on the Facebook page. It will be a live stream tour from Valley Forge. We'll be talking about the Continental Army during the winter of 1778. So George Washington's winter at Valley Forge. We'll be talking about that in a live stream in a couple of weeks. So please stay tuned for that. Follow the Facebook page, facebook.com/walkingtheground, all one word. At Walking Ground on Twitter. There's probably some other places as well. There's probably a Gmail account for email, and I think there's a TikTok account, and not on Instagram yet. There's like so many things, but definitely the Facebook page, facebook.com/walkingtheground, and at Walking Ground on Twitter. Thanks for your support. Thanks for following me. Thanks for putting up with the English accent. And it is a cold day today, and I'm about to go and get some coffee.